Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this Monday, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing very well and ready and raring to go.
Good.
Must be Monday, so
Yes.
we're ready to get going. I have an article today, and you saw it as well, having to do with arms sales, and we've talked about that a long time. And I think most of us know, and most Americans know, that we're big into the business. That's one business that's doing very good. And the balance of trade is wonderful. We keep selling, you know. So nobody's arguing any problem with trade. At the same time, we're fighting with all these trade problems and sanctions and everything else. Here we are. This is a booming business. And it looks like some statistics just came out, and Trump likes this business. He's bragged about it. He's reducing the so-called regulations to make sure no other country can compete with us. And so he wants less regulation and more encouragement. But we've been ahead in sales of weapons 25 years now. I think 1 year out of the last 26, somebody else infringed. But we have always been known as the weapons manufacturer, and there's a couple companies that make a few bucks on that. You know, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and they make big bucks. It's not millions, and it's not a few billions. It's many, many billions, and it epitomizes the evil of the military-industrial complex and how powerful they are. You know, every once in a while we talk about which is the most powerful lobbying group in Washington, and we have to be careful on which ones we pick.
Yeah.
But I think the military-industrial complex has to be up very high because it's so broad and how many people benefit by it. And I found the interesting thing about reading about this is arms sales and what we do through subsidies in our exports has all to do with foreign policy too. And the other thing that gets annoying is how our government officials, you know, at our embassies and the CIA and everything, they're there to promote sales. You know, and all of a sudden you hear people in our administration, they talk to, you know, important people around the world, and they're pumping up sales. They're not pumping up peace and prosperity and a sound economy, nothing like that, but they're pumping up sales. So, but the American people are pretty cynical about it all. They're catching on. They were very hopeful that the swamp would be cleaned out. Right now, I think there's room for more pessimism than anything, because I don't think the swamp is being cleaned out, especially when you see an official from Lockheed being appointed to the Defense Department as an advisor to the president, an executive from Lockheed Martin. I mean, it's incestuous, you know, in what they're doing. So what are we going to do about this? How are we going to get this stopped? We don't have enough people watching our program yet to send enough messages to Washington.
Well, it may shock some of our viewers to know that Boeing, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin do not sponsor our show.
Oh, there you go.
We don't, we're against war. But it is, you know, this is the article you mentioned, we saw it on antiwar.com, and it's Bill Hartung and Tom Engelhardt did a good piece about arms exports. And as you point out, 26 out of the last 27 years, we've been the biggest seller of arms on the planet. The majority of the weapons we sell goes to the Middle East, you know, and a lot of it is this quid pro quo with Saudi Arabia. We give you a lot of weapons, we sell you a lot of weapons and stuff, and we keep getting the oil, that sort of thing. But you're right, it is related to policy, and it is related to how we conduct ourselves, I think, in the Middle East.
Right. You know, when this big sale went through, and I think it had to do with that THAAD anti-ballistic missile, had to go through for Saudis. And but the price still was too high, you know, and they were negotiating. So our official from our government goes to, I guess it was Lockheed,
yeah.
And he gets a discount of $3 billion, you know. So that helped. So, oh yeah, that makes it look like a better deal. But they still weren't happy. Of course, there's enough bargaining room in there. It's just taxpayers' money and borrowing money and printed press money. So our government goes ahead and said, well, we're going to waive this extra fee because, you know, in theory, what happens is the taxpayers pay all the expense, all the cost overruns, and all the atrocious spending to build these weapons. And then But the taxpayers are protected because there's a rule that when these weapons, if they ever get sold to a country like Saudi Arabia, they're obligated to pay for the R&D to the U.S. Treasury. Well, that sounds like a terrible situation, but at least we're going to get our money back. Except They waived these things. On this deal here, they waived it. It was $3.5 billion. They just said, oh, Saudi, you're good guys. You're fighting our war in Yemen, and we're buddies there. So we're not going to press you on it. So they waived this fee on here. And that is so corrupt. And it's just a shame that it is this kind of operation that, is so self-destructive to our foreign policy as well as our economic system, and financially, I think it's going to be very damaging.
And the guy who called and made the deal with the Saudis was Kushner, the son-in-law. He's the guy who they stayed up with a pajama party with Mohammed bin Salman until 4 a.m, chatting and talking, and then he calls up and makes this deal for him. But
right.
As Hartung points out in his piece, first of all, we know that Trump is very aggressive, and he's not shy to say, we're here to promote weapons sales, buy some of our weapons. But he also points out that Obama wasn't much better. He points out that Obama made more arms offers in his 2 terms in the office than any president since World War II. So Obama, as the peace president, was up there too, selling weapons overseas.
Well, one of the items that has just come up recently about regulations that Trump was trying to enhance the export of were the drones.
Yeah.
Because I guess we have the technology, and we do sell and use weaponized drones, but there's these surveillance drones. So I guess a lot of people want these, and there's been some restrictions, and Trump wants a level playing field, level where it always leans toward our benefit and our business people. So that is what drew the attention, to the arms sale. But this has been an ongoing problem. You just wonder, if you took the last 25 years, since we've been the leaders for 25 years, how many dollars of real subsidies occurred? And then when you look at a $21 trillion national debt, and how that indirectly has contributed to that, what a difference it would make. And the biggest problem I see there is nobody sees what the cost is even yet. You put it away, another generation, another group of people, call it debt, print the money, but there's always a payment. And I think that's what we're witnessing now, and I think that's why we're witnessing the destruction of our social order, because even though there's a rosy number of on our economic reports, everybody knows there's a greater discrepancy now between the rich and the poor. The other day I saw a film on what some of the slums look like in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
The homeless. I mean,
unbelievable.
and yet they go unnoticed. They're not listed because unemployment's low and jobs are available. So, but I think that's a reflection of what we do, the type of foreign policy we have, and delaying the cost, and always putting the cost and the penalty on somebody else. So I see the people who have lost jobs, who honestly would have to find work, but are marginal workers, they become victims here. But as long as you can print enough money to sort of pacify them, throw them a little bit of this and this, we'll take care of them, and then we'll hide them, and then nobody will know that what the economy is really going. But I think that's coming to an end, and I think that's why we see a rocky stock market and financial markets right now. But our goal, of course, is to emphasize the fallacies in our foreign policy and why it's such a big contributing factor, even though there's a pretense. See, Trump can mix us in. This is good for business. We sell more stuff. It's going to be, look at all the profits these companies are going to make, and big payments, and executives are going to have more money, and they're going to invest it in more R&D and this sort of thing. But I think it's a fallacy.
And it perverts our foreign policy, and it perverts our political system. First of all, these profits, these enormous profits made by these companies, I think Lockheed is having record profits. These are also plowed back into congressional campaigns. So if you think someone is running for Congress and needs some money, is he going to be talking about being against war, against arms exports overseas? So it distorts the kinds of people that are elected into office and gets in people that are for that. But also, when we've talked about it so many times before, is that how Lockheed and the other arms dealers plow money into the think tanks. And this is a key, and we had Nicholas Taleb on to talk a lot about the think tanks, the mother of all evil in some ways. But this money pours into things like the Atlantic Council, and it pours into something like the Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA. And remember, CEPA was the home of Wes Mitchell, who's now the Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. That was Victoria Newland's old job. So he made his living off of money from the arms manufacturers, and he did really well. And now he's back in. Now he's in government, leading our European policy. Do you think he's going to be mean to these guys who want to sell? And you mentioned also John Rood, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy. Now, he was a Lockheed Martin executive, so it's the revolving door. So they're distorting our whole political system.
Yeah, that's for sure. And there are some hidden benefits that people don't talk about very much. They say, well, I can see where if we do the R&D and we pay these companies to make these weapons and they get all the cost overruns, then they sell at great profits to these foreign countries, that it's a big deal for them. But even over and above that, there are benefits when it comes to other subsidies that aren't even on the books, and that comes from an agency of government called OPIC, not OPEC, but OPIC is Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which shouldn't exist. And they say that, well, it doesn't even cost the taxpayer any money. It's no risk at all, which is not true, because we investigated that, and there was no appropriations but they got all their money through the back door, through payment of interest and through the monetary system. But because they said, well, there's no cost to the taxpayer, then why are we insurance? They're saying, why wouldn't the private market insure these exports? But what's so evil about this is if we send weapons to a country and there's some liability, they're exempt from it. If their company goes bankrupt, we insure their damage, even if it's their bad economic decisions or it's they lose money because of the internal wars that go on. And the weapons never end up in the places where we claim they're going to be, but they're protected either way. So that is an encouragement. Same way with Ex-Im Bank. Boeing is the biggest beneficiary of Ex-Import Bank money. Of course, it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything, but if anything goes wrong, and it's an encouragement of malinvestment. But yes, that gives discounts, enhances their profits, and also takes money from one group and put it in another one. But there's tremendous benefits from both OPIC and the Ex-Im Bank, and it should. And at times there will be fights in the Congress. I know we had a couple when I was there, and it is corporate welfareism, and it should be cut. But the odds of that being cut, because you'll find that the unions and the big corporations, they'll get together and they'll really support these things, because it protects the jobs that are paying higher than the normal wage should be, again, which is in contrast to the people on the lower end. So they get together. Democrats and Republicans are strong supporters of that. Once again, bipartisan agreement on these subsidies, on weaponry, on the foreign policy, the whole work. But this is the hard sell, is trying to convince people that there's not a real serious bipartisan fight going on in Washington. And I think they must get together at night and laugh at what's going on. Oh, we fooled them again. They think we hate each other. But when they passed this recent budget of 1.3 trillion, can't you just imagine them getting together? We fooled them again. And the Republican leaders and the Democrat leaders get together and laugh about it.
Congratulate each other on such a good job. Well, just to wrap it up, I think there's moral, economic, and security implications for this U.S. being the #1 arms sales. The moral issue is we really are, think about places like Yemen, how we are propping up the Saudi war against an innocent people who never attacked Saudi Arabia, and it really is a genocide there. Economic, we talked about it. These are not good jobs. These are bad jobs in a way. They don't produce anything of use, and they also distort our economy. And the security issue. Think about places like Syria, where all of these weapons that were exported end up in the hands of jihadists. So even if you're just hard-nosed, you don't want the moral issue, you want to deal with pure security, you're making us less secure by putting all these weapons overseas where they end up in the hands of bad actors. Over and over again it happens, and there's no denying it. So, and if I can, my final word is just to remind people now that we've had our long weekend, a holiday weekend, and we're still selling tickets for our conference on April 29th. We had a big boost in sales. People were sitting home clicking on ticket sales. So you can get your tickets there at the link, ronpaulinstitute.org/conference. But one more point, and I haven't made it that often, we made it in email, is that we are looking for people to co-sponsor the conference along with the Ron Paul Institute. And that is why between now and just a few days before the conference, any donation of $100 or more to the Ron Paul Institute, you will be listed as a co-sponsor of the conference in a special publication that we're providing at the conference, and also on this program. We'll roll you as part of our graphics. So go to ronpaulinstitute.org, click that support button, make a donation of $100 or more, and be one of the co-sponsors of the conference. And as a way of saying thank you, we'll give you a couple of free tickets to get in if you do so. So thanks very much.
Very good. Very, very good concluding.
My spiel.
Good to promote what we're trying to do in a broader fashion and have our conference, as well as your statement on the moral issue. I think that is so important, and I think we forget about it. I one time explained that the moral issue in the congressional floor and the Constitution were the worst arguments to use. You had to use practical arguments and which groups support what. But the moral issue is important. But Daniel, you also did mention some of the practical reasons and what the bad consequences are, and that's important as well. But I think the overriding moral issue is the initiation of aggression, using force, and the simple rules which has been endorsed by the major religions and our Constitution and anybody who professes freedom. And that is, you're not allowed to use force against people. There should be no lying, cheating, stealing, or killing. And yes, most of people realize that, and most people bend the rules and get away with it, but governments shouldn't participate. Too many people accept the principle, yes, it's a government. The government's okay. You can't ever lie to the government. The governments can lie to us endlessly. But governments shouldn't be able to lie, and they shouldn't be allowed to kill and steal. They steal, lie, cheat, and kill, and it's something that is a moral issue. But the morality has to be placed on the government, which means the people in government, so then the responsibility does fall on the people. And a moral people will send only the people in the best their ability to Washington and to be engaged that would follow these rules and regulations. But right now, unfortunately, we're in a tough situation because I believe in optimism. I believe there's an optimistic outcome to this, but not soon, and it won't be easy. But there is a lot of knowledge out there about how non-intervention foreign policy works, why it's so important to protect civil liberties, and why it is important to have sound money. All these ideas have advanced greatly, but I do believe that there will be a payment. There has to be a payment for our extravagance, both our moral extravagance as well as our economic extravagance as well as our militarism. So that will come, but that is an opportunity for us to offer this principle of peace and prosperity which we talk about. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.